Up on the testing block today is TeamGroup XTREEM ARGB addressable RGB RAM, 32 gigabytes, 3600. Let's take a look. So we've got two test systems. The first, an Intel 10600K, the new one, the one that just came out, 10th generation. That's the first test. But 3600, that gives it away. This is also for Ryzen 3600. It's the sweet spot, the Infinity Fabric sweet spot. But we'll come back to that system. First up, 8 to 64 testing. 50.1, 50.4 nanoseconds, something like that. And pretty respectable timings, 14, 15, 15, 35. Really the only thing here is the command rate is 2T. There are a lot of sub-timings that also go with memory. The command rate is how many clock cycles is spent sending a command to RAM. The fastest RAM is a command rate of 1T, 1 clock cycle. There's also gear down mode, which is related to that. And gear down mode is complicated, but effectively it's basically a 1.5 command rate. Gear down mode is after a transfer is completed, the clock speed is not as fixed as you might imagine it to be. It's not as fixed in every scenario, and so effectively there's a little bit of an extra delay because it was in a geared down state and then it has to come back up, and that's usually about half to 3/4 of a clock cycle. So you can get a little bit more stability with tighter timings with gear down mode, but let's not do an advanced RAM class. And I'm pretty sure that's right, but that might not be actually correct. So if you actually do DRAM engineering and you want to give me lots of really awesome information because you're a DRAM engineer, okay, that sounds good. But for this, command rate 2T, that and the voltage, 1.45 volts, that's how they're doing it. That's how they're doing it relatively inexpensively. Now the whole command rate thing, 1T, 2T, things got a lot more interesting when I took a closer look at the 3950X and the 3900X. So behind me, I've got the two systems set up. I've got an Intel 10600K, that's the i5, along with a 3900X Ryzen. And it's running the Creator X570 motherboard and the MSI Z490 MPG Edge. And that is one of the most affordable Z490 motherboards with one of the better, X570 boards that has, Creator type features from ASRock. So pretty awesome. On the Intel platform, even using memory that I know is designed for 1T won't boot. It will fail to boot specifying 1T for the command rate. Whereas the TeamGroup memory on the Ryzen system, 1T is no problem. I've also noticed that TFRC is a much higher number on the Intel platform in general with different kits of memory than on the AMD platform. So there's a lot of calculations and stuff like that going on. It's just differences in the platform, I think, being ironed out. But I thought it was really interesting. And the command rate may be something to check because on a different Ryzen system, on the 3950X system with the Gigabyte Aorus Master motherboard, by default, the TeamGroup memory comes up at a command rate of 2T. But if you specify 1T, it works fine. It seems to be stable. I just go in the BIOS and specify the command rate, and I disable gear down mode. On the ASRock board, I didn't have to do that. I just did a full clear CMOS, plugged it in, it came up with a command rate of 1T. I suspect that during the training process, if there's any weirdness, the first thing that it starts to change is to change the command rate from 1T to 2T, although that should be specified in the XMP profile. All of that done, that's just to walk you through what I did. Once you've made those changes, the timings here are very fast on a Ryzen system. So when we're doing benchmarks with things like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the numbers fall right in line for what I would expect with really tight timings memory kits on a Ryzen system. So they've also got the ARGB feature. And I did sort of go a little crazy with the ARGB feature. I tried to figure out a way to address the DIMMs individually so that I could, go all kit from Knight Rider. I'm just gonna have to settle for the intro. And it's a pretty cool effect. I'm controlling it with MSI Mystic Light on this MSI motherboard. It didn't require any special or third-party software, which is always nice to see. It is addressable RGB, so whatever Mystic Light is capable of, then that's what the RAM is capable of because it's addressable RGB and doesn't require any sort of special module or any update or anything like that. I just downloaded Mystic Light, I was good to go. On the 3950X, if you tune this kit, you can get it down to about 72, 73 nanoseconds of overall latency, and maybe even below 70 nanoseconds with a little bit more tuning, a little bit more time spent tuning it. But out of the box, it's about 75 nanoseconds. Now the XMP profile on the Intel system, of course, just over 50 nanoseconds. So it's a little different in terms of, you know, the platform differences. And of course, 10th gen, 5 gigahertz overclock on our 10600K. Well, it's a little different situation. Overall, build quality and the height of the memory and this kind of thing, the memory modules are a little too tall to use with coolers like the Darkbase Pro TR4, but as you can see with our relatively modest, you know, Pure Rock 2 cooler that we're using on our Intel system, there's plenty of clearance. CPU cooler still works fine. It's going to work better with taller memory. It's not as annoyingly tall as, like, say, the OLOY memory, where it's just ridiculously tall and there's nothing that you can do about it. It will fit under some tower coolers, so like if you got the Noctua tower cooler, the memory's not overly tall for the RGB component of it, that you have problems, you know, fitting the memory, or it makes the fan stick up way past the top of the cooling tower. This is also a particularly good choice of memory if you're going to get, you know, say a 2nd gen Threadripper, something's on sale, and they have a lesser expensive 3200 kit, for example. So 32 gigabytes of memory for your 16-core 2950X, this TeamGroup kit would be a really good deal for that. Of course, that's if you're going for the blinged out ARGB insanity. And the timings, you know, 14, 15, 15, even though they sort of have a little bit of a compromise with the command rate, the performance overall, like when you're benchmarking in games and things like that, it's not really much of a performance loss. Our worst case scenario is a game like Tomb Raider, where, you know, on the Intel system, 180 FPS at 1080p with a 2080 Ti, which is kind of an unusual use case. I mean, most people that are playing games to enjoy them, I don't think have that combination of hardware, but that is where you see the biggest difference with this memory kit versus, say, a faster memory kit on, say, an AMD Ryzen system. On the Intel system, there wasn't really a measurable margin of error. I mean, there wasn't really a measurable difference. There was a margin of error difference maybe of like 3 FPS at 3600 with this kit versus another 3600 kit of memory that had command rate 1 timings, but everything, and maybe the sub timings were a little tighter as well, but the primary timings in that range of, you know, 14 to 15, and, you know, like 14, 14, 14, 36, or 14, 15, 15, 36 for the competing memory kit, but command rate of 1. But the sub timings, you open a can of worms, because every kit of memory is a little different, and how they've engineered it and implemented it and things like that. TeamGroup as a company, they know what they're doing, and they've been around forever. They're not a no-name memory company. If anything, historically, they've been a little modest. They're a little late to the RGB game, which I don't blame them. They're probably looking at this like, adding LEDs is going to help us sell memory? Because I always like that about them for some of my builds, where it's just like, no, I just need memory that's good. I don't really care about RGB or anything else. And now they're like, addressable RGB, and they're doing a pretty good job with it. So given all that, TeamGroup, buy, don't buy? What's the verdict? TeamGroup has my seal of approval. They are a reputable company. They've been around for a long time. They have a new product that's got addressable RGB memory. It ticks all the boxes. It's going to come down to price and value. You have to look at competing memory kits and the features that they offer, but the timings on this memory kit are quite good, and the performance holds up. So if you're using it with a Team Red system, I think that's probably going to be my recommendation. You know, a Team Blue system, it'll still work, but Intel systems are more forgiving about memory speed. So you may be able to get away with a slower and less expensive memory kit on Intel without having any really deleterious effects on frame rate or performance, like a 3200 kit or a 3600 kit with worse timings. The timings on the Ryzen system are much better than the Intel system for whatever reason, but as we can see in the benchmarks, on the Ryzen system, it doesn't really make much of a difference. On the Intel system, it doesn't make much of a difference either, but for different reasons. So it's got my seal of approval. Good job, TeamGroup. I'm signing out, and I'll see you later.